Let's look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, yesterday, of course, as you all know, we did the 2022 NFL mock draft where we picked up players such as Kyle Hamilton, Jordan Davis, David Ojabo, Malik Willis, and many, many more young, talented playmakers for this Detroit Lions team to go into the future with, and we ended it off right after the NFL draft. But as everybody knows, right after the NFL draft comes undrafted free agency and priority UDFAs, and of course, trades, cuts, and roster battles and position battles. So today we're going to go over all of that, starting, of course, with the undrafted free agency class. Now, the way that I determined this was through the mock draft simulator. In the draft that we did, I paused it at the very, very last position, the very, very last pick of the NFL draft, and I went down and I scoured through the draft board of who was left, and I picked names that, of course, weren't taken in the NFL mock draft. I went through and I got a list of names that I really wanted as priority UDFAs, and actually one of them went with the very last pick, which was a little unfortunate. But even with that player coming off the board, I still have 10 priority UDFAs to bring in and at least have them there for camp battles and to compete for roster spots. So with that being said, the first player of the UDFA class is Zamir White, the running back from the University of Georgia. Has that connection with DeAndre Swift, was a member of the Georgia Bulldogs running back room when DeAndre Swift was a member of the Georgia Bulldogs. You know, they had that Bulldog connection. Zamir White averaged over 5 yards per carry as a bell cow in the SEC, had 11 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons. I think he could be a really, really good roster spot. I think he can take a roster spot for anybody. I think he can take a roster spot from Jermar Jefferson and probably even Craig Reynolds when it's all said and done during the preseason. The next player that I wanted to mention was Kevin Austin, the wide receiver out of Notre Dame. Had some pretty good production, has some pretty good speed, just a guy that, you know, maybe won't compete for a roster spot, but definitely can show some things in the preseason and maybe earn a practice squad position. Tay Martin, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma State, good size for a wide receiver. Again, just had good production in college, as a guy that I'd like to see in the preseason. Nothing really that special, but a guy that I think has enough upside to at least give a tryout and at least give a preseason roster spot. Ryan Hayes, the offensive tackle from Michigan, a member of that #1 offensive line that Michigan hosted a year ago. I think he can be a real good depth player for the Detroit Lions, and I think he can make it as that backup tackle in replacement of the player or the right tackle that we did not re-sign this offseason, where we did it the first time around. So I think Ryan Hayes can step in as that last offensive lineman and that primary backup tackle. Big Cat Bryant, the edge out of USC, is the next player. Again, a player that was really productive at Auburn, transferred to UCF, a guy that just had the numbers in college and a guy that just has the ability to play at the next level. At least at the very worst, he can come in and compete for the last edge rusher spot with Austin Bryant and Myron Tagovailoa Amosa, the other edge rusher that I have in this undrafted free agency class, the edge out of Notre Dame. Both of them have some high upside and have some good numbers, but I didn't really feel comfortable drafting them that highly. But as an undrafted free agent, I think they'd be really, really good pickups. You also have Shaka Hayward. You also have Shaka Hayward, the linebacker out of Duke. Again, really productive, pretty good size, really good instincts for Duke. Played at a Power 5 school. You can give him at least a chance for the roster. BJ Foster, I think, has 6 or 8 interceptions in his college career at Texas. A guy that wasn't going to go super highly in the draft, but a guy that nonetheless can just kind of step in and be that quality depth guy, can be your next Jerry Jacobs, can be your next AJ Parker, and just can step up and at the very least be on the practice squad for when our secondary gets hurt yet again. And I actually have two more players to address in the secondary, the second player of which is Caesar Williams, the cornerback out of Wisconsin, and the third one is Nolan Turner, the safety out of Clemson. This UDFA class, again, you may not know all of the names, but I think you're going to know some of them. They're guys with high upside, guys that produced in college, maybe weren't worth an NFL draft pick, but guys that are absolutely priority undrafted free agents. And they're all guys that I think, for the most part, maybe outside of the two wide receivers, can compete for roster spots in practice squad players that can stay on the team and help develop for the long-term future. And with that being said, we have one trade in this video. Now, Trey Flowers is a player that I've talked about before that I believe the Lions need to trade. He's taking up over $20 million a season in a cap hit while only playing like 2 to 3 games a season over his past couple of years and has only had one productive season as a Detroit Lion. Now, the Detroit Lions, the new NFL league year starts on June 1st. That is when the contracts roll over, and that is when the new contracts begin. And if the Lions trade Trey Flowers after that June 1st deadline, they will free up over $17.6 million in cap while only facing about $5 million in dead cap. Now, with that being the case, I think we trade away Trey Flowers. I think with your edge rushing room of the Okwara brothers, David Ajabo, Charles Harris, and Austin Bryant, there is no room for Trey Flowers on that kind of a contract because I don't think he'd start anyway because obviously he's been outproduced by at least 2 of those guys. You spent a first-round pick on that third guy. Trey Flowers doesn't have a place here anymore, and you need to trade or cut him after that June 1st deadline. Now, I think we trade him back to the Patriots. I think the Patriots could use a rotational edge rusher. Obviously, he's familiar with the Matt Patricia system. He'd be a pretty good fit in New England. I don't think New England would give up a lot, probably a late day 3 pick, something in the 7th round. You get something back for Trey Flowers. You get something back for that enormous contract. But at the end of the day, he'll still go down as one of the worst signings in Detroit's Lions history. Now, that being the case, let's get on to the depth chart and the positional battles. Now, obviously, Jared Goff is your quarterback one, a guy that proved himself at the end of the year, played really well in the last couple of games of play, and will go into next season as the starting quarterback. Dwayne Haskins is your quarterback two, a guy that just has some high upside, former first-round pick, is a little bit more polished, and obviously is caught up to the NFL speed better than Malik Willis. Malik Willis is your future, but your present is Jared Goff and Dwayne Haskins. And again, Malik Willis will kind of move around as from that second to third quarterback, depending on how early in the season or when he needs to be called upon. At running back, DeAndre Swift is your 1, Jamal Williams is your 2, Kyron Williams is your 3, Craig Reynolds is your 4, Jamar Jefferson is your 5, and Zamir White is your 6th running back. I think Zamir White can push for an RB4 spot. I think he can realistically beat out Jamar Jefferson and realistically beat out Craig Reynolds. Not to take anything away from Craig Reynolds and not even take anything away from Jamar Jefferson, but I think Zamir White is incredibly talented. His nickname is Zeus for a reason, and he took over the Georgia Bulldogs running back room in the absence of DeAndre Swift and Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. After that trio left, obviously there was one guy that needed to step up, and Zamir White was that guy, and I think he can do it again in Detroit and push for not only a roster spot, but can beat out 2 different running backs on this roster. Jason Kabinda is your only fullback. That's the only position and the only guy without any real competition this year. Your wide receiver core is pretty deep, consisting of Chris Godwin at the 1, Josh Reynolds at the 2, Amon-Ra St. Brown as your slot wide receiver, Quintez Cephas as your 4, the primary backup to Chris Godwin, Byron Pringle, really the primary backup to Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot, or your really deep threat that you bring in every once in a while to try to hit a big play. Jalen Naylor is your 6 wide receiver, Trinity Benson is your 7, Ty Fogel is your 8, Kevin Austin and Tay Martin bring up the rear at the 9 and 10 spots. Again, Kevin Austin and Tay Martin are more likely to be practice squads and camp bodies, but I think the first 8 wide receivers are going to make a really, really good receiving core for the Detroit Lions and give Jared Goff plenty of ammunition to use in the 2022 season. Tight end is loaded with TJ Hawkinson as your number 1, David Njoku as your number 2, Trey McBride as your number 3, and Brock Wright as your number 4. Arguably, maybe the best tight end room and maybe the best tight ends group in the NFL with 2 legitimate starters, 1 top 50 pick, and again, Brock Wright, the undrafted free agent that played really, really well a season ago. Your offensive line looked very similar to a year ago with Taylor Decker at left tackle, Jonah Jackson at left guard, Frank Ragnow at center, Big V at right guard, and Penei Sewell at the right tackle position. Logan Stenberg, Evan Brown, Tommy Kramer, and Ryan Hayes are your backups. I think all 9 of those guys make the team, and I think all 9 of those guys play on the active roster each and every Sunday. Now, the offense looks so much better, in my opinion, and it doesn't really look like it's unrealistic, right? You add your quarterback of the future, you add an RB3 and an RB5, you add a wide receiver 1, and you add some depth linebackers and some depth tight ends. The Lions didn't break the bank on offense. The Lions didn't spend big money on offense, but they got enough ammunition for Jared Goff that if Jared Goff continues to improve, continues to move forward, and get more comfortable with these guys, he has enough ammunition to put up some big numbers in 2022. And again, a lot of the big money was spent on the defensive side of the football, but even then, it doesn't look that unrealistic. Your defensive line, or your interior defensive line, I should say, consists of Michael Brockers, Aleem McNeil, and Jordan Davis starting for you as your front 3 in their 3-4 system. You have obviously Levi and John Pennicini being rotational guys for run stopping purposes or for pass rushing purposes. Levi will come in on pass rushing downs, and John Pennicini may come in on rushing downs, like short yardage situations, goal line situations, and in wake of injury. Your edge rushers consist of Romeo Okwara, David Ajabo, Charles Harris, Julian Okwara, Austin Bryant, Cat Bryant, and Myron Tagovailoa Amosa. Again, I think Okwara brothers, Ajabo, and Charles Harris have that front 4 locked up, but obviously Austin Bryant got a lot of time last year, and I believe had 3 sacks on the season in the first year that he was consistently healthy. The edge rushers may not have a chance to break that top 5, but have a chance to make the practice squad. Your linebacker depth is incredible this year, with obviously Alex Anzalone being your 1, Leighton Vander Esch being your 2, Rashaan Evans being your 3, Jalen Reeves-Maybin being your 4, Derek Barnes being your 5, Darian Beavers being your 6, DeMarco Jackson being a special teams guy at your 7th linebacker, and Shaka Hayward, the linebacker from Duke, bringing up the rear as your linebacker 8. You have your cornerback room is incredibly deep with Amani Oruwariye, Jeff Okudah, AJ Parker, Jerry Jacobs, Ifeatu Melifonwu, Kobe Bryant, Caesar Williams, and B.J. Foster. Again, a really deep, really young, but super high upside and super talented secondary, especially in the cornerbacks room. And it only gets better when you look at the safeties, as the safety room consists of Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, Tracy Walker, Jabril Peppers, Will Harris, and Nolan Turner, with, of course, your special teams being Riley Patterson as the kicker, Jack Fox as the punter, and Scott Daly as your long snapper. All in all, it brings you to a 69-man roster out of the 70 players you were allowed to have on your preseason roster. Again, the one player that you're missing is Trey Flowers, who was traded away earlier in the offseason. But with that being said, that is your 2022 Detroit Lions. That is your 2022 mock offseason. The Lions get a lot of talent. The Lions get a lot of youth, but a lot of really good, impactful players for the future. And I think that this team can compete for the playoffs. This team on this piece of paper right here can compete for the NFL playoffs, especially with the schedule that they have next season. And honestly, if this team doesn't make the playoffs, they would be underperforming, because this team is talented. They're built to win, and they're built to win for a very, very long time. With all that being said, that is life for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think about the mock offseason. Let me know what you think about the Detroit Lions roster going into 2022 in this mock draft scenario. I'd be very curious to hear what you guys liked and what you guys didn't like about the mock offseason. With all that being said, that is all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions!